Obviously, we've been having some supply chain issues for a while. Go all the way back to COVID. We've been talking about supply chain challenges for a long, long time. And to be very clear, the Baltimore Bridge collapse will not help that. Afternoon, we have a bit of a lighter week here this week before the holiday weekend and inflation data coming up tomorrow. But we will be touching on the Baltimore Bridge collapse and some of the economic impacts today. So stay tuned to the end while we'll kind of share our take on, what we're seeing there and what impacts may kind of carry forward. Before we get to that, although it was a lighter week, I do want to touch on some of the economic data that's kind of come out in the past week here. And again, this is kind of the calm before the storm because we do have inflation data coming out tomorrow as well. But we had new home sales come out. New home sales on Monday came out at 662,000. So this is a little below expectations and slightly lower than the last reading. We also had pending home sales. So pending home sales were actually up 1.6%. Versus the prior reading was actually down 4.9, so certainly a tick up there, but obviously from a lower point. On top of that, we also had consumer confidence and consumer sentiment. Basically, consumer confidence both were not super exciting, but consumer confidence was down below expectations and pretty similar to the prior reading. Consumer sentiment was up slightly, but again, nothing to really write home about. So again, this week, as far as data, I don't know that there was a whole lot. If you follow the markets, you probably know as well that there wasn't a whole lot of excitement either. Certainly a good day. I believe it was yesterday on Wednesday, but otherwise it's been pretty quiet in the markets as well. However, we also got jobless claims today. Jobless claims came out at 210,000. So nothing really to highlight here necessarily, just kind of more of the same. Let's put it that way. But be sure to tune in next week on tomorrow. So markets are closed tomorrow for Good Friday. However, we still get PCE inflation data tomorrow. So although the markets will be closed, it is an important day as far as data for sure. We also have income and spending, and all of that is before kind of jumping into jobs week as well. So certainly a lot to cover in the next few weeks here. However, what I do want to spend some time on this week is a really good question of the week from Julie. And the question of the week, of course, as you've probably been seeing in the news, is going to be tied to that story. It's all about the Baltimore Bridge collapse and some of the impacts to the economy, to inflation, to trade, all that good stuff. So here's what I want to share to kind of tee up the conversation. Obviously, we've been having some supply chain issues for a while. Go all the way back to COVID. We've been talking about supply chain challenges for a long, long time. And to be very clear, the Baltimore Bridge collapse will not help that. Obviously, that's going to affect trade to some degree. It's going to affect supply chains to some degree. However, I would share that I think that this is getting a little bit overblown in terms of the economic impacts. Don't get me wrong, still important to watch, still important to kind of keep an eye on and see how long this takes and what things shift. And, obviously, unfortunately, there was also a lot of personal impact to this, with some of the victims from the collapse. But from an economic perspective, it's important to watch, but I don't know that it's going to make or break anything. I think what we will see. So obviously, for those who do kind of pay attention and in between the lines here, obviously, this is going to impact the local economy. So don't get me wrong, this will have an impact for sure, especially in that area. A lot of jobs, things like that, that could be a bit of a challenge. But again, from the more global or even national economy, I don't feel like this is going to have quite the impact that maybe some of the headlines might be suggesting. However, again, it will impact inflation and supply chains for sure. Now, that said, one of the things that you've heard me share time and time again is that the inflation that we've been dealing with, we can blame supply chains all we want. And don't get me wrong, that has an impact, but it's really about money supply. And so what I think we're going to start to see is if inflation is higher, we're going to point to the bridge and talk about how the bridge was the issue. But the reality is I just think inflation is going to be stickier regardless. And so if we have a higher inflation data point, the bridge may have an impact, don't get me wrong, but I don't think that it's going to be the make or break of inflation moving forward. And so, again, it's important to watch, but take a little bit of the headline news stories you're seeing with a bit of a grain of salt. The one thing I will point out, and actually we're talking about this a little bit today in the office, but that particular port has a lot of cars and car parts that are kind of part of that trade. And so one of the big sticking points, I guess, in inflation has been, well, new and used cars, but also, some of the services tied to that. So again, we might see a bit of a tick up in that particular arena, which will be really interesting to watch in the coming inflation data points. But, again, more broadly, it's money supply. This stuff does matter, don't get me wrong, but it's money supply and how that has kind of impacted inflation. And the fact that interest rates in and of themselves do not bring inflation down. It's really money supply that drives most of that. So that's really what we're focused on. This is important. It's an important story to watch, but take those headlines with a bit of a grain of salt. And certainly, the inflation part of it would probably be the biggest thing to watch as far as how this impacts the economy nationally and globally, because that could dictate some of the Fed's path and what the markets expect there. So again, very sad situation certainly for the local economy and some of the victims of the collapse. But to be clear, from a more global or national economic perspective, it might have a slight impact, but I don't think it's going to be a make or break situation by any means. So, Julie, thank you for sending that in. We're seeing it obviously it's all over the news, so it's a very timely topic. So I really appreciate bringing that to our attention. And if you have any questions for next week, certainly let us know. You can mention it in the comments or send me a message directly, and we'll do our best to kind of answer some of the questions that you have on your mind in our weekly updates. In the meantime, enjoy the holiday weekend. Again, markets are closed tomorrow, but if you are paying close attention, the inflation data will be important to watch. And enjoy your Easter weekend. Otherwise, we'll see you next Thursday, and we'll catch you up on everything in between at that point. Have a great weekend. See you next Thursday at 3.